The sound of latex gloves snapping against skin echoed through the silence of the salon. It was the only warning we got. A second later, Felix, the owner of the city's most exclusive salon, wasn't just refusing to cut my sister's hair. He was holding a trash bag open in front of her face. "Get your head away from my Italian leather chairs," he shouted, his voice booming so the entire room could hear. "You are a biohazard. You're dripping grease all over my equipment." He didn't just humiliate her. He pulled out his phone and started live streaming, laughing as my little sister sobbed into her hands. He thought she was just some dirty teenager nobody cared about. He had no idea that the man who taught her to walk was a billionaire army ranger, and he was pulling into our driveway right now. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. To understand why this hurts so much, you have to understand Harper. My sister Harper is the kind of girl who apologizes to furniture if she bumps into it. She's 18, soft-spoken, and has a heart too big for this cruel world. But for the last year, she's been fighting a battle against her own body. A severe hormonal imbalance sent her oil glands into overdrive. It didn't matter if she showered 3 times a day or used medical-grade scrub. Within 4 hours, her dark hair would look slick, heavy, and wet against her scalp. It destroyed her. She stopped going to the movies. She stopped dating. She wore hoodies in the middle of July just to hide her head. I'm her big brother, Kyle. I worked double shifts at a logistics firm, and I saved up for 6 months to get her an appointment at Vogue. It wasn't just a salon, it was the place. The owner, Felix, called himself a hair architect. His waiting list was 4 months long. I thought if anyone could treat her scalp and give her a cut that hid the issue, it was him. I wanted to buy her confidence back. Instead, I bought her a nightmare. We walked in at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. The place smelled like peppermint and arrogance. The receptionist looked us up and down like we were lost, but she checked us in. Harper was shaking. "Kyle, I can't do this," she whispered, pulling the strings of her hoodie tight. "Everyone here looks perfect. I look like I haven't bathed in a week." "Hey," I said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "You're paying for a service. You have every right to be here. Dad would tell you to keep your chin up, remember?" At the mention of Dad, she straightened up a little. Our father, Grant, had been gone for 8 months on a classified security contract overseas. Harper missed him like a limb. "Okay," she breathed. "For Dad." Then Felix walked out. He was a thin man in a suit that cost more than my car, with teeth so white they looked fake. He gestured for Harper to sit in the center chair, the spotlight chair. Harper sat down and slowly, painfully, lowered her hood. The room went quiet. I saw 2 women in the drying section nudge each other and point. Felix stepped forward. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask what she wanted. He reached out with 2 fingers, lifted a lock of Harper's hair, and then dropped it like it was infected. He wiped his fingers on a towel with an exaggerated grimace. "Ugh." Felix groaned loud enough for the back room to hear. "Is this a joke?" "Excuse me." I stepped forward. "We have an appointment." "I don't do oil changes, kid." "I do hair," Felix sneered. He turned to his assistant. "Get the disinfectant spray. Now." Harper shrank into the chair, tears instantly welling in her eyes. "It's a medical condition," she squeaked out. "I washed it an hour ago." "I don't care if you have the plague," Felix snapped. "You are ruining my aesthetic. Look at this." He grabbed a bottle of hairspray and sprayed it at her, like she was a stray dog. That's when he pulled out his phone. I saw the screen light up. He was on Instagram Live. "Guys, look at what just walked in," Felix said to his camera, panning it right into Harper's crying face. "This is why we need stricter screening. This girl is practically dripping. It's disgusting. It's offensive to my other clients." I saw red. I didn't think. I just moved. I stepped between him and Harper, knocking his hand away. "Put the phone away before I break it." Felix laughed. "Oh, a tough guy? In my salon." He snapped his fingers, and 2 large security guards stepped out from the back office. "Get this trash out. And burn the cape she was wearing. I'm not washing it." The guards grabbed me. I struggled, but they were big. They shoved me toward the door. Another one grabbed Harper by her arm, too rough, and practically threw her out of the chair. And don't come back until you learn what a shower is. Felix yelled as they pushed us onto the sidewalk. The glass door slammed shut, and I could see him inside, still filming, mocking us to his audience. Harper didn't scream. She didn't yell. She just crumbled. She sat on the curb of that busy street, pulled her knees to her chest, and made a sound I will never forget. A silent, gasping sob of pure brokenness. "I'm sorry, Kyle," she choked out. "I'm so sorry I embarrassed you." "Get in the car," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I didn't know how to control. "We're going home." The drive back was silent. I kept gripping the steering wheel, imagining what I would do to Felix if I wasn't afraid of going to jail. I wanted to burn the world down, but I had to be strong for her. We lived in a quiet area, a large house set back from the road. Dad bought it with his tech money after he retired from active duty, before he started taking these private contracts. It was our sanctuary. As I turned into the long driveway, I slammed on the brakes. There was a black SUV parked in front of the garage. It was dusty, like it had been driven long and hard. The trunk was open. A duffel bag sat on the gravel. My heart hammered in my chest. He wasn't supposed to be back until next week. Standing on the porch, leaning against the railing with a cup of coffee in his hand, was Grant, our dad. He looked older than I remembered. His beard was graying, and there was a new scar above his eyebrow. He was wearing faded jeans and a black t-shirt that stretched tight across his chest. He looked relaxed, happy to be home. He raised the coffee cup in a salute as we pulled up. He was smiling. I parked the car. Harper didn't move. She couldn't stop crying. Her face was blotchy, her eyes swollen shut, her hair a mess from where she'd been pulling at it. Dad's smile vanished before he even set the cup down. He walked down the porch steps. He didn't run. He moved with that terrifying, predatory grace of a man who has hunted people for a living. He opened the passenger door. "Harper," he said softly. Harper unbuckled her seatbelt and fell into him. She buried her face in his shirt, sobbing so hard her whole body convulsed. "Daddy, I'm ugly," she wailed. "I'm disgusting." Grant didn't say, "No, you're not." He didn't offer empty platitudes. He held her. He wrapped his arms around her like a shield, his hand cradling the back of her head, right over the oily hair Felix had mocked. He didn't care about the grease. He kissed the top of her head. Then, he looked up at me over her shoulder. I have never been scared of my father. He is a good man. But in that moment, looking into his eyes, I felt a chill run down my spine. His eyes were completely dead. The warmth was gone. The father was gone. The ranger was there. "Kyle," he said. His voice was so quiet I almost couldn't hear it over the wind. "Report." I swallowed hard, stepping out of the car. We went to a salon. The owner, he live-streamed her. He called her a biohazard. He had his guards throw us out on the street. Grant nodded slowly. Just once. He didn't blink. He gently pulled away from Harper, wiped a tear from her cheek with his rough thumb, and looked at her with an intensity that could start a fire. "Go inside, sweetheart," he whispered. "Take a warm bath. Dad has some work to do." "Where are you going?" she sniffled, clutching his hand. Grant turned to look back toward the city lights in the distance. He checked his watch. "I'm just going to make an appointment," he said. By sunset, Dad hadn't said another word. He disappeared into his study without dinner, and from behind the locked door came the faint whir of his computer cooling fans. I knew that sound meant one thing: research. I sat on the couch, watching through the half-open study door as columns of data flashed on his screen. Bank records, business licenses, property ownership, police reports. He wasn't just being a protective father. He was building a psychological profile. At one point, I caught a glimpse of Felix's picture on the monitor. Beneath it was a line of text: prior complaints, verbal abuse, client intimidation, racial slurs, no legal action filed. Dad leaned back in the chair, eyes narrowed. His knuckles were pressed together beneath his chin. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked calculating. When he emerged, it was nearly midnight. He carried his old duffel bag from the garage, army issue, worn and faded. He set it on the counter and opened it. Inside was nothing lethal, just relics from a past life. A black tactical jacket, a pair of heavy boots, gloves, and an old Ranger coin. He wasn't getting violent. He was preparing. "Where are you headed?" I asked quietly. "Downtown," he said, without meeting my eyes. "I need to see him in his own habitat. Alone." He pulled on the jacket and the boots, the uniform of a man who knew how to move through shadows. For a moment, he looked almost younger, sharper. Then, he picked up a small collapsible cane from the bag, the last thing to complete the costume of an old, worn-out man. "I'm not Dad tonight, Kyle," he said, tightening the strap on his watch. "I'm no one." An hour later, his boots crunched across the wet sidewalk outside Vogue Salon. The glowing gold sign looked almost divine against the night sky, elegant, detached, untouchable. Inside, the stylists were laughing over drinks, cleaning up from the day, while Felix sat behind the counter, counting bills and scrolling through his phone. Dad stood outside long enough to memorize the rhythm of the place, the entry points, the mirrors, how Felix moved. Then he pushed the door open. The smell hit first, chemicals and champagne. Felix looked up, instantly disgusted. Excuse me," he said, wrinkling his nose. "We're closed." Dad hunched a little, playing his role perfectly. His voice came out gravelly, older. "Sorry, son, cold night. Just need a glass of water if you've got one." "Water?" Felix blinked, incredulous. "This is not a shelter, old man. Out. Go beg down the block." Dad just smiled, that soft, disarming smile I recognized from all his missions, the one that meant he's watching, not speaking. "I'll be gone soon," he said calmly. "That's a fine watch you've got there, son." Felix snorted. "Yeah, limited edition. You think you're in a pawn shop?" He turned to his assistant. "Call security. I don't want him scaring the clients." Dad's eyes flicked once, catching a small detail on Felix's computer screen before she minimized it. Client transfers, anonymous payments. He filed it away in memory. "I fought for this city once," Dad murmured quietly. "Didn't think I'd see it rot so fast." Felix rolled his eyes. "That's cute. Maybe write it in your little veteran diary. Doors that way, Grandpa." Dad took one last long look at him. The expensive shoes, the fake smile, the hands manicured within an inch of their life, and quietly turned to leave. "You've got 10 days, he said softly. Felix frowned. "What?" "Nothing. Just talking to myself." Outside, the wind picked up. Dad stood under the flickering streetlight, pulling out his phone. "I was watching everything through the Live Tracker app he made me install long ago." When he spoke into the small mic on his jacket, his voice came through my earbuds back home. "Recon complete," he said. "He's rotten. And careless." "What's next?" I whispered. There was a pause. Then I heard that tone again, low, precise, the one he used when he decided a mission's outcome. "Tomorrow, he'll think he's meeting a new investor," Dad said. "And when he looks up, he'll see me again." The next morning, Grant was gone before sunrise. The car was already fueled, a stack of business cards on the dashboard, fake identities, all too perfect to trace. By noon, he parked across from Vogue Salon in a silver Mercedes. This time, his disguise was flawless: shaved beard, clean cut, navy blue suit, and a Rolex. Real, because he believed in blending truth with the lie. He picked up his phone and made a call to the receptionist, introducing himself in a slightly southern accent. "Yes, this is Mr. Anthony Price. I was told your owner is looking for expansion investors. Can we meet privately today?" The trap was set by 1 p.m. Felix agreed instantly, blinded by the scent of money. He didn't even recognize the voice. Around 2:30, Dad walked through those same golden doors, no longer the beggar, but a businessman oozing confidence. Felix greeted him like royalty. "Mr. Price, welcome. You've picked the best in the city." Dad smiled, shaking his hand firmly. "I always bet on confidence. Let's see if it's earned." He let his eyes roam across the salon, gauging the exits, memorizing angles. Felix led him to his office in the back. I've been looking for a luxury grooming chain to invest in, Dad said smoothly. Tell me, what makes Vogue special? Felix grinned, pulling out his tablet. We target premium clients. Image-conscious women, influencers, high-status men. The rest. He waved dismissively. We filter them out. Low energy doesn't belong in a high-vibration brand. Filter them out, Dad repeated quietly, tapping the desk with one finger. You mean kick them out? Felix laughed. You'd be surprised how much better the place smells when you do. There was a flicker in Dad's eyes at that, the faint tremor of contained fury. He leaned back, forcing a polite chuckle. I assume your filtering doesn't ever cause publicity issues. Never. We control the narrative. I even posted a viral video yesterday of some greasy girl who tried to sneak in without paying deposit. People loved it. Dad froze. He didn't blink. He just tilted his head slightly, as if adjusting to the sound. You posted it yourself? He asked softly. Felix grinned, proud of it. Damn right. 40,000 views overnight. She deserved it. Inside, something in Dad's chest went completely still. That video, he said in a low voice. Leave it up. Don't delete it yet. Felix frowned. Why? Dad smiled faintly. Because when I destroy your name, I want the world to see how it started. The smile dropped from Felix's face, realization dawning a second too late. Felix leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing at Dad's tone. For the first time, a sliver of unease flashed across his smug face. Excuse me. Felix scoffed. Destroy my name? That's dramatic. You investors sure like to sound mysterious. You're not threatening me, are you? Dad's gaze softened, almost kind, but the look didn't reach his eyes. Felix, I don't threaten people. I give them opportunities to recognize what they've done before the world does it for them. He stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket. Unfortunately, you've already wasted yours. Felix smirked, trying to laugh it off. You have no idea who you're talking to. Dad's voice was quiet but cutting. Neither do you. Before Felix could respond, Dad turned toward the mirror behind the desk, the same ornate one Felix used for influencer videos. In the reflection, you could see both their faces, one confident, the other beginning to pale. The silence between them stretched long. Then Dad broke it. You humiliated a child on camera, he said flatly. You broadcast her pain for likes. That's not confidence, Felix. That's rot. Felix shifted uncomfortably. That girl, with the greasy hair. He rolled his eyes. She's lucky I even let her walk in here. I curate this space. Not everyone deserves. He didn't get to finish. Dad reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, placing it gently on Felix's mahogany desk. It was a printed screenshot, Felix's video thumbnail, with Harper's tear-streaked face frozen mid-sob beneath the words, "Look what just walked in." The view counter read, 83,204. I watched, Dad said softly. So did the people who work for me. You'd be shocked at how quickly files like yours find their way into the wrong hands. Felix blinked. My files. Wealthy men like you. Dad continued, lowering himself back into the leather chair, elbows on his knees. Always leave a trail. Purchases. Expenses. Transfers. My company owns half the payment processors you use. You've been very busy hiding debt, haven't you? Felix's knuckles went white around the tablet he was holding. You have no right to. I have every right, Dad said, standing again, this time slower, calmer. Because you made this personal. You opened your mouth about my daughter. Felix's jaw locked. Your daughter. The words escaped faintly, more like realization than speech. Dad nodded once. Harper, the girl you filmed. The one you dragged out of this place. He took a step forward, lowering his voice until it was almost a whisper. And now, I want you to feel something. Just a taste of what she felt. Humiliation. He glanced at the front door. The glass entrance still carried a faint reflection from the sunlight outside. Several clients were milling around the lobby, just visible enough if a voice got loud enough. Dad leaned in. Now, you're going to apologize. Felix stammered, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. You can't just barge in here and demand. Louder, Dad said, his tone like a knife's edge. Say her name. Felix hesitated. He wasn't used to losing control. Mister, you're crazy. Get out before I call security. Dad's head tilted ever so slightly. Security? Oh, you mean the same guards who shoved my 18-year-old daughter into the street? Good. Call them. Felix grabbed his phone, hitting a button. Moments later, one of the same muscular guards, the bald one with the neck tattoo, entered. This guy bothering you, boss? The guard asked. Felix jabbed a finger at Dad. Throw him out. The guard took a step forward but froze halfway. Grant didn't even shift position. He just turned his eyes toward the man. Dead calm, razor-sharp eyes under soft lighting. The kind of gaze soldiers carry home from darker places. Something in that silence unnerved the guard. His stance broke first. He lowered his arms and hesitated. Boss, you sure about this? Felix lost patience. Do it. That's an order. The guard glanced again at Grant, then back at Felix. Finally, he said, you hired me to stop trouble, not walk into it. This guy doesn't look like trouble. He is trouble. He turned and walked away, muttering, I don't get paid enough for this. The door shut behind him. Grant didn't move, just exhaled slowly through his nose. For a second, the tension in the room was suffocating, chains of fear tightening with every heartbeat. Felix tried to recover with a sneer. Think scaring my staff makes you a hero? You're one punch away from prison, old man. Grant smiled faintly. One punch is all I'll ever need. And just like that, Felix snapped. He swung first. It wasn't even a real punch, more like a desperate slap from a man used to hiding behind words. Dad didn't dodge. He caught Felix's wrist midair in a single fluid motion. Everything slowed. The air in the room seemed to thin out. And then, with one precise twist, there was a sickening crack. Felix screamed, stumbling backward, clutching his jaw with both hands. The crash of the glass display behind him echoed like thunder. One side of his face swelled almost instantly. Dad looked down at him, not proud, not angry, just disappointed. You asked for this, he said quietly. I warned you. People in the lobby rushed toward the noise, gasping. Phones came out. Cameras rolled. Felix dropped to his knees, moaning incoherently through the pain, eyes wide in disbelief. Grant glanced at the shattered glass, then at the door. He didn't run. He just fixed his jacket collar, smoothed his sleeve cuffs, and said to the stunned stylists, tell him this is what respect feels like when it hits back. Then he walked out. 10 minutes later, I got the call on my phone. Dad, I whispered. His voice was calm. He swung first. That means? When the cops ask, that's your line. Nothing more. Nothing less. He hung up. Outside, the city was buzzing. A clip was already trending online titled, Salon owner gets karma. Real-life justice. The footage showed only the end. The broken jaw, the man in a suit leaving quietly through a ring of light. I knew exactly who that man was. And I also knew this wasn't over. Because knowing Dad, breaking the jaw was only the beginning. By the time I reached downtown, flashing lights painted the street in red and blue. Vogue Salon was swarmed, reporters, cops, and a cluster of influencers trying to film reaction shorts. Felix had already been loaded into an ambulance, his jaw wrapped in thick white bandages. He looked small now, powerless, clutching his designer scarf like it could still protect his pride. Dad stood a few feet away, calm as ever. His hands were cuffed behind him, posture steady, eyes fixed on nothing. No shouting, no struggle, just composure. An officer was reading him his rights, but Dad wasn't even listening. He looked satisfied. I forced my way toward him. Dad, I shouted. What the hell happened? He turned his head slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He tried to hit me, he said simply. Gravity did the rest. Then he nodded toward a briefcase lying near the police cruiser. Take that home, Kyle. Keep it closed until I call. The officer beside him frowned. Back away, sir. He's in custody. Dad didn't argue. He ducked his head into the car, calm as if he was headed to a board meeting. But I saw it, that glint behind his eyes. This wasn't surrender. It was something else. Something planned. When the cruiser drove away, the crowd followed like bees chasing honey. I stood there alone, holding that black leather case like it was made of glass. Back home, the smell of lavender soap lingered in the hallway. Harper had just finished showering, wearing one of Dad's old army shirts. She looked up as I walked in. Her skin was red from hot water and crying, but her eyes had a little light again, a spark that wasn't there yesterday. "Where's Dad?" she asked. I hesitated. "At the station." "What happened?" I set the briefcase on the table. "He handled Felix." Her face went pale. "He didn't." "No," I said quickly. "But Felix's jaw, it's bad." Then I looked toward the window. Outside, camera flashes were lighting up our driveway, and the city's losing its mind over it. She pressed her lips together, trembling. "He did it because of me." I moved closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. "He did it for you. There's a difference." She shook her head. "They'll ruin him, Kyle. Felix is loved by half the city's elite. Everyone powerful gets their hair done there." "Maybe," I said quietly, my heart pounding. "But Dad's more powerful than all of them combined." That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt alive, buzzing with hidden electricity. It was past midnight when my phone lit up. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Is the briefcase still sealed?" Dad's voice came through, firm and clear. "Yes." "What's in it?" "Proof," he said. "Enough to burn that man's world to the ground. Listen carefully. Call Oliver in the morning. Tell him to file an injunction before Felix's lawyers move first." "What's in the proof?" I asked. "Receipts," he replied. "Every illegal dollar that built his empire." A pause. "And Kyle," Dad added, voice lowering. "No one opens that case but Eliza." Click. The call ended. I didn't know who Eliza was. But the next day, a woman showed up at our house in a tailored gray suit and dark sunglasses. She looked mid-30s, sharp-eyed, the kind of person whose presence smelled like power. "You must be Kyle," she said, flashing an ID that read Eliza Grant, Legal Affairs. My breath caught. "Grant. Same last name. You family." "Former," she said briskly. "We don't discuss that part." She placed the briefcase on the table and snapped it open. Inside were neatly stacked folders, external drives, and a single flash drive marked Vogue Internal Payments. Eliza raised a brow. "Your father doesn't half-step, does he?" "What's in there?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Enough for prison time." The file transfers took hours. I watched as screen after screen filled with spreadsheets, bank statements, and scanned invoices. Felix's business was a facade. Monthly marketing expenses wired to shell accounts, unrecorded transactions, backroom deals with dangerous-looking merchants. But one folder stopped her cold. Client treatments, restricted. She clicked it open. It contained lists of names. Dozens. Some had medical conditions noted beside them. Scalp burns, allergic reactions, even hair loss and infections. She frowned. "These aren't complaints. They're internal risk logs." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Eliza said slowly, "Felix knew his treatments were toxic. He just didn't care. He kept using banned chemicals because they were cheap and addictive. It made clients' hair worse, forcing them to keep coming back." My stomach turned. "You're saying he made people sick?" "On purpose." Her jaw tightened. "That's not all. Look at this date." She pointed at the screen. 2 years ago. The same week your sister started complaining about her scalp condition. The room went silent. Harper's medical issue? The one that destroyed her confidence? It wasn't a disease. It was a slow burn from chemicals Felix had once used on her. "He poisoned her," I whispered, feeling my chest tighten. Eliza nodded grimly. "And your father must have known before he confronted him. That's why he said 10 days. I looked up. 10 days for what? "To make sure Felix's own system buried him," she replied. "Your dad plays the long game." By afternoon, everything was moving. Eliza's team filed countersuits, froze accounts, and secured news coverage before Felix's PR team could twist the narrative. The story flipped overnight. Celebrity stylist exposed for using illegal products. Meanwhile, Felix himself was still at the hospital, his jaw wired, doped up on painkillers, completely unaware his empire was crumbling in real time. But the part no one saw, the part that shook me, was Dad's calm voice over the phone that night. "It's not about revenge," he said. "It's about balance." He took pride in humiliating people. Now he'll live every day knowing the whole world saw the truth about him. A pause. "Tomorrow," he added, "we reclaim what was taken from her." The next morning, while the city buzzed with scandal, Harper stood in front of the mirror for the first time in months without crying. She brushed her hair slowly, still heavy, still healing, but she didn't hide. For the first time since it all started, she looked at herself and whispered, "He doesn't own this anymore." Downstairs, Dad's car pulled into the driveway. This time, he wasn't wearing a suit or a uniform, just a simple gray hoodie and worn jeans. Harper turned when he entered the room. Her voice was soft. "Did he lose everything?" Dad smiled gently. Almost. I asked. "There's one thing left," he replied, pulling a sealed envelope from his jacket. It was marked with Felix's company logo, his signature. "He still thinks his building's safe." Harper frowned. "What do you mean?" Dad handed me the envelope. "Because as of this morning," he paused, his eyes glinting like cold steel, "I own Vogue." The air in our living room went still after Dad said it. For a second, neither Harper nor I could process his words. He stood there, envelope between two fingers, calm and controlled. But there was a current beneath his stillness that made it impossible to speak. Harper finally blinked, voice fragile. "You own it? You mean the Salon?" Dad nodded once, setting the envelope on the dining table like it was just another bill. "Every inch of that building. I told you, he had 10 days. He didn't pay his corporate lease. His arrogance blinded him. And I bought the land through a holding company before he even noticed it was for sale." I let out a shaky laugh. "You bought the place out from under him?" Dad's eyes hardened just slightly. "No, son. I took it from him. Legally, quietly, and permanently." Harper sat down, stunned. "So what happens now?" "Now," Dad said, slipping off his jacket, "he'll face everything he put others through. Only this time, it's not pride he'll lose, it's control." The next morning, the city woke up to a headline that flipped public opinion overnight. Luxury salon exposed, illegal treatments, fraudulent licenses, banned chemicals linked to celebrity hair expert Felix Voss. Eliza's legal strike hit precisely at dawn. She moved faster than Felix's PR team could breathe. His assets were frozen, his companies flagged for investigation, his brand sponsorships vanished within hours. The dominoes were falling, and none of them stopped at mercy. I was at the kitchen counter scrolling news feeds when Dad's quiet footsteps came down the hall. "Is he awake yet?" I asked. Dad gave a faint nod. "They discharged him this morning. Hospital security tipped us off. He'll go to the Salon," Eliza said, appearing in the doorway with a tablet in hand. She'd stayed overnight coordinating the war room. That's all narcissists do when they panic. They return to their pedestal. Dad smiled thinly. "Then that's where we'll meet him." By noon, we were parked half a block away from Vogue. Through the tinted windows, we could see Felix limping toward the entrance, jaw bandaged, rage radiating off him like heat waves. A small crowd, reporters, ex-clients, curious strangers, had gathered along the sidewalk. They weren't here for beauty tips anymore. They were here for the fall. "He's still going inside," I said. "Does he even realize he's about to?" Dad interrupted. He pulled out his phone, pressed one button. Down the street, two men in suits stepped out of a black car and followed Felix inside. Property managers from our company. From inside, muffled voices rose, then a shout. "What do you mean I'm locked out of my own salon?" Felix's yell cut through the glass. People outside started recording again. Dad's gaze didn't shift from the building. "And now he performs," he murmured. The doors burst open. Felix stumbled out, clutching paperwork in one hand and screaming, "This is illegal. You can't do this to me." Dad stepped out of the car, walking toward him slowly, each step measured, steady, almost cinematic. The crowd quieted like instinct, to make room for something bigger than noise. Felix saw him and froze. "You," he spat through the bandages. "You did this. You psycho old man. Watch it," Dad said smoothly. "You're on camera again. I'd hate for you to embarrass yourself twice." Felix's breathing quickened. "You can't just steal my life." "I didn't steal it," Dad said evenly. "You sold it to your own ego." He handed a document to the nearest reporter, public property transfer forms bearing Felix's signature. The man read aloud as the crowd recorded. Felix lunged forward, jabbing a trembling finger. "You think you've won? You'll rot in court." That's funny." Eliza's voice cut in as she stepped from behind Dad. "You're suing him from a building he owns. The lease expired yesterday. Legally, you're trespassing." Police sirens echoed nearby. Felix's lawyer, pale, sweating, rushed across the street and whispered something in his ear. Whatever he said froze Felix mid-word. Every ounce of fight drained from his body. Dad just watched him, expression unreadable. "Leave before you're escorted," he said softly. For the first time, Felix didn't argue. He turned and limped away down the street, shoving through the cameras, covering his bruised jaw as the reporters shouted questions. When he disappeared into the crowd, Dad whispered under his breath, balance restored. By sunset, the locks were changed. The golden Vogue letters above the door came down. Harper stood under the sign, watching as workers replaced it with plain plywood until further renovation. Her eyes shimmered in the amber light, half sad, half free. She turned to Dad. "What are you going to do with it?" He offered her the new keys. "That's not my decision anymore." She stared at the keychain, hesitant. "I can't run a salon." "No," he said gently. "But you can rebuild what he destroyed." Her lips trembled. "I don't want it to be like him. I want it to feel safe." Dad smiled. "Then make it safe. Start there. He built pain for profit. You'll build dignity." She looked at him for a long time, then wrapped her arms around him. For the first time since this nightmare started, she wasn't crying from shame. She was crying from relief. Later that evening, when the crowd dispersed and the street quieted, we went inside. The mirrors were cracked from the earlier fight, the scent of hair product and bleach still clinging to the air. Dad walked through the empty place slowly, touching the walls, running a hand over the marble counter. "Remember this, Harper," he said quietly. "Power used to humiliate others is never power. It's weakness wearing a gold watch." She nodded. "He called me a hazard," she whispered. "Said I didn't belong here." Dad tilted his head, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "Funny. Now it's yours." He took one last look around the salon, his now, and turned toward the door. "Tomorrow," he said, "we bring in the inspectors. Let's find out just how deep his rot goes." Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the faint hum of traffic and fresh beginnings. Harper reached out, locking the doors to her building for the first time. From down the block, flashes from photographers still sparked, desperate to capture an ending. But this wasn't the end. This was the quiet before the next storm. Because if Felix thought humiliation was over, he hadn't realized the real punishment was still coming. The world was just starting to learn who he truly was. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows of the now silent Vogue, but it didn't look like the same place anymore. The mirrors had been covered, the gold decor stripped away, and the silence felt almost reverent. It was hard to believe that 24 hours ago, this space had been Felix's kingdom. Now, it belonged to the very family he humiliated. Dad was already there before dawn, dressed in worn boots and a black flannel, clipboard in hand. Harper and I walked in carrying coffee. The sound of our footsteps echoed against the bare tile floor. "This place feels haunted," Harper murmured. "It's not haunted," Dad said without looking up. "It's just full of lies. We'll clear them out soon enough." He motioned toward the back room. the one Felix never let cameras show. A team of city inspectors was already unpacking their tools and taking pictures of the walls, ducts, and chemical cabinets. A faint, bitter smell still hung in the air. I followed one inspector, a woman named Lila, as she cracked open the storage fridge. The second she did, her face twisted. "Oh my God," she whispered. "These are illegal compounds. Half of this stuff's banned. It eats through human skin in concentrations this high." Dad joined her, eyes cold. "He used those on clients?" Lila nodded. "Diluted forms. Strong enough to give anyone a chemical burn after a few exposures. I'm not surprised people had scalp infections. This could cause permanent nerve damage." Harper's hand went to her mouth. She looked like the floor had vanished beneath her. "That means," she whispered, "that's what he used on me." Dad's jaw tightened. He said nothing, just reached into his pocket, pulled out a small evidence bag, and carefully scooped a sample of the powder. "We'll keep this for the prosecutors," he said quietly. "They'll need proof of intent." By midday, the inspection was over. Half the salon was cordoned off in yellow tape. Eliza arrived with a folder under her arm, her expression unreadable. "It's worse than we thought," she said, setting the papers down on the front counter. "He forged product safety certificates and paid off city auditors to look the other way. Everything's documented. Every bribe, every fake test result. We'll need to file federal charges." Dad nodded once, a clockwork movement of pure discipline. "Do it." She hesitated. "You know this means court appearances, interviews, televised hearings. This won't stay quiet." "I don't want quiet," he said. "I want sunlight." Around noon, Felix finally resurfaced. The front door swung open and he limped in, bandaged, sunglasses masking the swelling, his lawyer trailing 2 steps behind him. The air grew heavier the second he stepped inside. "This is still my property," Felix barked, his words muffled by the wired jaw. "I'm here to collect personal belongings." Dad turned to face him slowly. "The only thing you'll be collecting is your conscience. You left everything else behind." Felix slammed a document onto the counter. Your lawyer has seen the lease transfer," Eliza interrupted smoothly. "You're trespassing again, Mr. Voss. But since we're civilized, we'll let you take what's yours, 1 box of personal effects. Nothing more." Felix's gaze darted to Harper. His lips curled under the bandages, the ugly shape of a sneer still visible. "So this is your revenge? Dress up my shop as a charity case." Harper didn't flinch this time. She met his stare, calm but fierce. "No," she said. "This is healing. Something you've never understood." For the first time, Felix had no answer. He grabbed a small box of items from under the counter. Expensive perfumes, framed awards, fake certificates of excellence. The irony was painful. As he turned to leave, Dad stopped him. "One condition," Dad said lightly. "Before you walk out, you apologize." Felix froze. "Excuse me." "You'll turn around, look her in the eye, and say you were wrong. Not for me. For her." Felix let out a short, strangled laugh. "You broke my jaw? You think I'll give you a soundbite?" Dad stepped forward, close enough that Felix could see his own reflection in the calm steel gray of his eyes. "You made her feel worthless. You made her think she was less than human. I don't need your apology for forgiveness. I need it for closure." Felix trembled with anger, but something inside him cracked. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe fear. He lowered his eyes, voice low and slurred but audible. "I'm sorry." Harper's chin lifted slightly. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She just nodded. "Now you can go." Felix turned, muttering curses under his breath, and pushed through the door into the daylight he didn't deserve. The next few days became a storm of headlines. News anchors called it the great unmasking of Felix Voss. Talk shows debated whether Dad had gone too far. But beneath all the noise, one thing became clear. The truth had shifted public favor. People who once worshipped Felix started sharing their own horror stories. Former employees came forward. A class action formed overnight. And in the middle of it all, Harper was quiet. Not broken quiet, peaceful quiet. She spent long hours inside the stripped-down salon, repainting walls, scrubbing stations. Every chemical smell that washed away felt like another piece of poison leaving her life. I visited one afternoon and found her standing by the mirror where Felix had humiliated her. The glass had been replaced. The new frame was plain oak, warm, human, honest. She looked at her reflection and smiled faintly. "For the first time," she said softly, "this mirror doesn't hate me." Dad, standing behind her, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then it's finally serving its purpose." The night before reopening, Dad called a small meeting in the empty salon. Just family and Eliza. The chairs gleamed. The new sign was covered with a white sheet, waiting for morning. "I've seen wars end uglier than this," he said, voice calm but heavy. "But none of them taught me what this one did." "What's that?" I asked. "That the quiet kind of justice lasts the longest," he said. "Not the one that draws blood, the one that rebuilds." He looked around at us. "Tomorrow, Harper's in charge. This place doesn't belong to revenge anymore. It belongs to healing." Harper turned toward him, eyes glassy. "What about you, Dad?" He smiled. "Me? I've already done my part. Now it's time to go home." "But this is home," she whispered. He touched her cheek gently. "No, sweetheart. This," he gestured around, "this is yours. Mine's wherever my kids walk free." As he walked out into the night, I realized something. He was leaving behind not just a building, but an inheritance made of respect instead of riches. And for Felix, karma worked faster than we ever could. A week later, news broke that his financial crimes went deeper than anyone thought. Laundered money, evaded taxes, all documented thanks to Eliza's files. The same day the charges went public, his expensive loft was repossessed. He vanished from the city media after that. No posts, no live streams. Just silence. The internet forgot him as quickly as it had worshipped him. But every morning, when the first clients lined up for the reopening of the new salon, they saw a simple wooden sign above the door. Not gold, not glass. Just one word, carved by hand. Pure. The morning Pure opened its doors, the whole block seemed to stop and stare. There was no red carpet, no flashing cameras, no designer launch. Just soft acoustic music, the smell of fresh paint, and sunlight spilling through clean glass. Where Felix's gold sign once screamed for attention, Harper's new wooden one whispered it instead. Humble, real, and unshakable. I stood by the doorway, holding a stack of flyers while Harper arranged simple flowers near the reception. Dad wasn't there. He'd insisted the place would breathe easier without him in it today. But I knew he was watching from a distance. The man couldn't stand still when his kids were building something. "First appointment's at 9, Harper said, glancing at the wall clock. "You ready for this, Kyle?" I smiled. "I'm just the cashier for the day. You're the heartbeat here." She laughed softly, music I hadn't heard in months. "Then let's make it beat." At exactly 9 o'clock, the door opened. A woman stepped in, maybe mid-40s, wearing a worn denim jacket and a nervous smile. Her hair was uneven, brittle at the ends, signs of treatment damage. She clutched a small coupon from the paper. Harper greeted her like an old friend. "Hi, welcome to Pure. What's your name?" "Angela," the woman said quietly. I used to come here a couple years ago, back when it was." "You don't need to explain," Harper interrupted gently. "You're safe here now. Sit wherever you like." Angela blinked, surprised by the kindness. It took her a moment to realize there was no receptionist glare, no judgmental once-over. Just warmth. As Harper worked, I caught fragments of their conversation. Angela confessed how Felix had shamed her for gray roots on camera once, how she'd stopped going to salons after that day. Harper didn't say much. She just listened, then transformed the woman with care, not chemicals. When Angela looked into the mirror an hour later, tears brimmed. "Do I pay you now or after I stop crying?" she joked weakly. Harper laughed and hugged her. For the first time, the words "thank you" echoed where insults once had. I stepped outside to breathe. The street felt different. Even the air seemed cleaner, lighter. That's when a familiar black SUV pulled up at the curb. Dad got out, wearing his gray hoodie and aviators. He didn't walk toward Pure yet, just watched through the window as the salon filled with light and laughter. He looked proud, but there was something else in his stance too, unfinished business. Still keeping your distance? I asked, walking to him. This isn't mine anymore, he said, eyes fixed on Harper. It's hers, but something about the quiet doesn't sit right yet. Felix won't stay silent forever. He was right. Later that evening, while Harper closed shop, Eliza burst through the door holding her tablet, face pale. We've got a situation, she said. My stomach dropped. What happened? Eliza spun the screen. It showed a news headline. Breaking. Former Salon mogul Felix Voss countersues billionaire veteran Dominic Grant. Claims assault was premeditated and financially motivated. Underneath was a blurry photo. Dad being led into the police car from that day. Felix's blood visible on the marble behind him. He's back, Eliza muttered. And he's using the media to twist everything. Says your father attacked him to seize the business. I clenched my fists. He's lying. Everyone saw the truth. Eliza nodded grimly. It won't matter unless we stay ahead. His lawyers are already filing for emergency hearings. If they succeed, they could freeze your father's accounts. Before I could speak, Harper walked out from the back room, wiping her hands. Let them try, she said softly. They can't erase the truth. Dad stepped inside just then, silent as usual, like the air itself made room for him. He'd clearly seen the same news on his phone. He's desperate, he said flatly. A drowning man clawing for air. Eliza sighed. Desperate men pull others down with them. Dad turned toward her, a small smirk playing on his lips. Then we'll give him an anchor instead. The court hearing was set for Monday. The days leading up to it felt endless. Reporters camped outside Pure, chasing sound bites. Felix appeared on live TV, his jaw still swollen, painting himself as a victim of violent jealousy and corporate sabotage. Harper refused interviews, refusing to give his narrative oxygen. He feeds on reaction, she told me. I'm not giving him that. Dad spent those quiet nights reviewing files with Eliza, the only light in our house coming from their laptops. I'd hear fragments of conversation, emails, payment records, witness lists. Every piece was another nail in Felix's self-made coffin. Then, the morning of the hearing arrived. The courthouse smelled like old paper and fear. Journalists packed the steps. Camera flashes strobed like lightning. Felix arrived in a tailored black suit, trying to look confident. Behind him trailed his PR handler whispering about sympathy angles. Dad entered with no entourage, just Eliza and us. He didn't speak, didn't even glance Felix's way. Only Harper's hand brushed his arm, steady and strong. When the session began, Felix's lawyers launched their attack. They painted Dad as a violent businessman obsessed with revenge, claiming the assault ruined Felix's career. Eliza let them talk. She took notes, calm as water waiting to boil. Then, when the judge finally turned to our side, she rose. Your Honor, she began, voice clear, steady, lethal. The plaintiff alleges premeditated assault. But before we discuss intent, we must define what provocation looks like. The lights dimmed slightly as she handed a flash drive to the clerk. The courtroom screen flickered, and suddenly, Felix's own live stream appeared. The very one where he'd shamed Harper. The sound filled every corner. His laughter, his words, the tears. Felix jerked upright, eyes wide. Objection. That's private property. The judge frowned. You streamed this publicly, Mr. Voss. The audio kept playing. Biohazard. Filthy. Get her out of my salon. Then came the footage from the salon camera, the unedited clip showing Felix swing first. A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned back, unimpressed. Mr. Voss, care to explain this? Felix's lawyer stuttered, scrambling for excuses. But the silence swallowed him. Eliza closed her folder. Premeditation? No, Your Honor. This was self-control. One strike in self-defense after an unprovoked assault. Dad remained perfectly still, not a flicker of emotion. Harper bowed her head, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, not from pain, just release. When the verdict came, it was clear, case dismissed. No further action. Outside, microphones swarmed. Reporters shouted for statements. Dad gave them one sentence only. "I didn't break his jaw for revenge," he said, eyes steady on the cameras. "I did it to stop what should have never started." Then he walked away, leaving the court and the noise behind, his daughter's hand clasped firmly in his own. That evening, back at Pure, the lights glowed soft through the windows. Harper hung a new framed quote near the mirror, the one Felix once used to humiliate her. It read, "Dignity is the quietest kind of revenge." Dad stood behind her, hands in his pockets, proud and wordless. The storm had passed, but the peace that remained carried more power than any fight ever could. The next few weeks turned the city inside out. Everywhere you looked, online, talk shows, even morning radio, people were talking about Pure. Not as the new salon built from scandal, but as a symbol of something bigger. A place of second chances. A quiet rebellion against cruelty disguised as class. For Harper, each day started before sunrise. She didn't wear designer shoes or lean on luxury branding. She spent hours sweeping floors, mixing treatments by hand, and talking to women who came in carrying invisible scars. And people loved her for it. It wasn't about fame anymore. It was about trust. The kind Felix never managed to buy. Dad mostly stayed in the background, letting her lead. Still, sometimes I caught him parked across the street, watching from inside his black SUV, a thermos of coffee in hand, and that proud, unreadable look on his face. One night I knocked on his window. "You can't just sit here like security." He smiled faintly. "I'm not security, son. I'm a guard." Same thing. He looked back at Pure's soft lights across the street. "No. Security is when you protect something. Guarding means you make sure no one ever takes it away again." But beneath all the progress, another tension was brewing. Felix had gone quiet publicly after losing in court. No posts, no appearances, but silence from a man like him wasn't peace. It was plotting. Eliza sensed it too. She came by the house late one evening, dropping a thick folder on Dad's desk. "He's in debt trouble again," she said. "He sold his apartment and moved into a rented suite on the outskirts. But that's not all. He's meeting with a tabloid journalist who's been paid before to flip stories." Dad raised an eyebrow. "He's still trying to spin this?" Eliza nodded. "He's desperate. Word is, he's claiming Harper's success is built on pity. He's painting the entire story as a staged act, calls it a sympathy business built by violence." I slammed my hand on the desk. He never quits. Dad didn't even blink. He carefully closed the folder. "Then we finish it for him. Permanently, legally, and publicly." Eliza crossed her arms. "How?" Dad leaned back, the spark of the strategist returning to his eyes. "We take the story away from him." The next morning, Harper woke up to find a new message from Dad on her phone. Just a single line. "It's time to speak." She hadn't done a single interview since the scandal. She'd refused everything: magazines, podcasts, even news features. But this time, something in her had changed. She looked at Pure, full of customers who laughed, who cried, who healed, and realized silence might protect her peace, but it wouldn't protect others still suffering like she once did. So she said yes. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. A small, local program. Not flashy, just honest. Harper sat before the camera with simple makeup, wearing a plain white blouse and the same quiet strength Dad had taught her. The interviewer, a soft-spoken woman named Violet, asked, "Harper, people call Pure a story of revenge. Is that what it is for you?" Harper took a breath. "No," she said. "Revenge is loud. This was healing, and healing is quiet. My dad didn't fight for ego. He fought to show me what self-worth looks like." The interviewer nodded gently. "And Felix? Do you hate him?" There was a pause. Harper smiled sadly. "No, I pity him. You can't hate someone who already lives inside their own punishment. The screen faded to credits with that line. By midnight, the clip had gone viral, not for shock, but for truth. People didn't share it because it was juicy. They shared it because it felt real. Comment sections filled with stories of similar shame, of recovery, of fathers and brothers who stood up quietly the way Dad had. Even major networks picked it up. Harper Grant breaks silence. The power of dignity. The next day, Felix tried to release his counter video, but no one cared anymore. The world had moved past him. Views stayed in the hundreds, not millions. Every comment mocked his lies. His name was already a cautionary tale, an example teachers used to talk about how fame without integrity eats itself alive. Still, Dad wasn't satisfied. He's not done until he stops crawling, he told Eliza over the phone. Then you'll be glad to know, she replied. The IRS just opened an investigation into those payments we found on the flash drive. Dad chuckled quietly. Karma just turned professional. That Saturday night, Harper hosted a soft reopening event for Pure's new wellness division, a community space offering free scalp care and counseling for girls bullied for appearance. The turnout was massive. I stood near the back wall, watching Dad blend into the crowd, shaking hands awkwardly with people who kept thanking him for what he'd done. He hated the attention but endured it for Harper. Then Violet, the interviewer, found him and asked if he'd say a few words. He tried to refuse, but Harper nudged him gently. Just talk, Dad, she whispered. Not as a soldier. As a father. He exhaled, stepped toward the mic, and the room fell silent. I used to think strength was about winning fights, he began. But the truth is, real strength is staying calm when the world would cheer for your collapse. He looked at Harper. Felix thought cruelty made him powerful. But today, my daughter proved that love is what people remember longer. Her voice outlasted every insult. The crowd applauded softly. He stepped back, looked embarrassed, and whispered to Harper, I'm done giving speeches for the next decade. She laughed through tears, hugging him in front of everyone. Later that night, after the guests left, only the three of us remained inside Pure. The lights were dim. The city sounds muffled beyond the glass. Harper was mopping the floor. Old habits die hard, when her phone buzzed. She checked it and froze. It's Felix, she murmured. He sent an email. Dad stiffened instantly. Read it. She opened it slowly, voice trembling. It just says, I lost everything. You win. And then one word after that. Sorry. Silence filled the room. Dad walked over, took the phone, stared at the message for a long time, then handed it back. Keep it, he said. That's the first honest thing he's ever done. Harper blinked up at him. You forgive him? He nodded. Forgiveness isn't for him. It's for us. So this story ends clean. As we stepped outside, the city was quiet. For the first time in months, there were no cameras, no whispers, no waiting trouble. Just peace. Harper looked back at the sign above the door, tracing the carved letters with her eyes. Think it's really over? I asked. Dad smiled at her, that same faint half-smile that said more than words could. It's over the moment she believes it is. She took a deep breath and nodded. Then I guess it's over. Winter settled over the city like a quiet confession. Snow dusted the window ledges of Pure, softening every edge that once carried chaos. The sound of laughter inside the salon now felt like background music to life, the kind of comfortable noise that means everything terrible has finally passed. Harper was busier than ever. Clients came from miles away, not for luxury, but for the comfort that place provided. Her chair had become more like a counselor's. People walked in with broken confidence and walked out lighter. I watched her sometimes, thinking about how different she looked from the girl who once cried in the car. Now her eyes glowed with calm strength. Her voice carried peace even in silence. Dad stayed mostly in the background. He would drop by now and then, pretending it was for coffee, though we both knew it was just to make sure everything still felt safe. That was his way of protecting us, by pretending he wasn't. It was a Friday evening when Eliza called again. I was closing the shutters when her name flashed on my screen. "Hey," I said. "You watching the snowfall too? Or working again?" Her voice came brisk but steady. "Both. But I've got something you should see." Felix's final hearing wrapped up today. My heart skipped. He lost again? Eliza's voice held the trace of satisfaction. He didn't even show up. No lawyer. Nothing. He signed his assets over to liquidation. His company's gone, Kyle. He's done. I exhaled, half shocked, half relieved. "So it's really over." "It is," she said, softer now. "He'll face some charges, but it's financial ruin, not revenge. Your father's tactic worked exactly as intended." When I told Dad later, he didn't crack a smile. He just nodded, saying, "Justice isn't about breaking bones. It's about leaving lessons behind." The next morning, we planned something simple, something Harper wanted to do since we reclaimed the building. A rebirth day, she called it. She gathered every staff member, every volunteer, even a few loyal clients who'd stood by her during the storm. Curtains were drawn back, mirrors polished, walls repainted in shades of soft beige and forest green. No gold, no marble, just warmth. Before cutting the ribbon officially this time, Harper handed Dad a small pair of silver scissors. "You should do it," she said. He shook his head. "No, I already got to be the muscle. You deserve the light." But she smiled that stubborn Grant smile and took his hand. "You built the fight that gave me peace. We do it together." So they cut it, hand in hand. That afternoon, the Salon played host to something unexpected. A journalist from one of the same networks that had once crucified Dad's name asked for a positive feature segment. Redemption in the form of family, they called it. The reporter, a young man named Nathaniel, interviewed clients who spoke passionately about being treated with respect, about Harper's empathy. When he asked her how it felt to have Pure become a movement, she answered simply, "I never built a movement. I built a mirror, so people could see their own worth again." The line hit deeper than she realized. Within days, that clip became another viral trend, but unlike the first, this one carried serenity, not rage. Hashtags like #PureChange and #TheKindSalon flooded the timeline. Influencers began repeating her words as quotes of empowerment. For once, the internet listened to something gentle. That night, the family gathered in the salon after closing, just Dad, Harper, and me. The lights were dim, the air smelled of candles, and soft snow fell outside against the glass. "Feels like a different world," I said. "It is," Harper answered, sweeping a loose strand of hair from her face. "It's a world we had to rebuild." Dad leaned back in the chair Felix once owned and smiled. "Sometimes destruction is just renovation with sharper edges." We laughed quietly, the sound mixing with the hum of the heater. Then Harper turned serious. "Dad, when you hit him, did you regret it later?" He looked down for a long moment before replying. "I didn't regret the hit," he said softly. "I regretted what led to it. I spent my life fighting wars against strangers. Never thought I'd fight one in my daughter's name. But maybe this was the one worth fighting." Harper reached for his hand. "It was the one that built me." Outside, in an almost poetic twist, the very corner where Felix once screamed insults was now the place where a small child stood with her mother, laughing, taking photos by the snow-covered Pure sign. The reflection in the glass showed 3 people watching from within, a father, a son, a daughter. Harper whispered, "Do you think people can really change, Dad?" He didn't hesitate. "People can. Pain can't. It just transforms into something else. Wisdom, if you're lucky." Weeks turned into months. Life fell into gentle rhythms again. Harper expanded Pure into a small wellness line. Eliza moved on to new clients, though she visited often for coffee and gossip. Dad spoke at a veterans charity about rebuilding purpose. For the first time since I could remember, no one was running, hiding, or fighting. It almost felt suspicious. Peace always does. Until one evening Harper found a letter slipped under Pure's front door. She called us immediately. We read the note together at the counter. It was written in an unsteady hand. To the girl I hurt, your father broke my jaw, but you broke my pride. And thank God you did. I'm leaving this city. I'm starting over, far away, where no one knows my name. I hope someday you'll believe I can become what you are, clean. Felix. Harper stared at the paper for a long time while the snow outside thickened. She should hate him, I said finally. But she won't. Dad smiled faintly. Because she became who he wished he could have been. Then he folded the letter, slid it into the drawer beside the register, and said, "Let it live there. It belongs to the story, not the wounds." That night, after we locked the door and turned off the lights, Harper whispered to the empty space, "It's really over now." Dad looked back once more. "No," he said quietly. "Now it's just beginning." Because in the stillness of Pierce's new life, revenge had finally transformed into legacy. Spring came earlier than usual that year. The snow melted into quiet puddles along the sidewalks outside Pure, and for the first time in a long while, sunlight didn't feel harsh. It felt like renewal. The city had changed its conversations. No more headlines about courtroom fights or scandal. Now, you'd hear people talking about the place that treated everyone like they mattered. Harper had turned Pure into something no one expected. Every Sunday morning, she opened the doors not for clients, but for community. Women who couldn't afford salon treatment came in for free wash days. Survivors of bullying, abuse, or illness shared stories while Harper and her small team worked with their hands and hearts. Dad funded every penny but never once stepped inside during those hours. "It's her temple," he said. "I'm not meant to preach in it." Still, he'd stand across the street, coffee in hand, watching with quiet pride as the laughter poured out of the windows. One of those Sundays, something unusual happened. A black car pulled up by the curb. A man got out, a thin, unshaven figure wearing a long coat and a baseball cap. For a split second, I didn't recognize him. Then he lifted his head. It was Felix. He didn't walk immediately toward the door. He just stood there under the morning light, looking at the sign that now read Pure, a salon for all. The world had aged him. His posture wasn't that of the arrogant man who once ruled this block. It was of someone hollowed out by choices. I stepped out before Harper could see him, closing the door behind me. "You shouldn't be here," I said quietly. He nodded slowly, eyes tired. "I know. I just needed to see it once. To see what I destroyed." "You didn't just destroy it," I said. "You made it what it is now." He gave a small, defeated laugh. "Then I guess that's the only good thing I've ever built, by accident." For a long moment, we stood in silence. The city went on around us, indifferent. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This isn't trouble," he said. "It's insurance money. The last of what I own. I named the salon in my will. If I ever die without family, it goes to her." I blinked. "Why?" He looked up at the wooden sign again. "Because it's the first thing I ever hurt that healed without me." He tried to hand me the envelope, but I shook my head. "You give it to her yourself? If you're sorry, she deserves to hear it." He hesitated, then finally nodded. When Harper stepped outside and saw him, I thought she'd turn and walk away. But she didn't. She paused, took a slow breath, and approached quietly. Dad must have been watching from his SUV down the street, but he didn't interfere. Felix held out the envelope like a peace offering. "It's not payment," he said quietly. "It's closure." Harper took it, not even looking at it right away. "I forgave you already," she said softly. "But if you're trying to make peace with yourself, I hope it works." "I just wanted to see it with my own eyes," Felix said. "The place. The peace. You turned my shame into something beautiful." Harper smiled gently. "You gave me the reason to do it." He looked down, a tear sliding silently down his cheek, the kind that doesn't beg for pity. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. He didn't look back. Dad got out of the car as soon as Felix disappeared. "He came back, didn't he?" "Yeah," Harper said. "But this time, he came differently." Dad put an arm around her shoulders, his tone soft. "Some men spend half their lives growing powerful, only to spend the other half wishing they'd grown wise instead." She looked at him, smiling faintly. "You're turning poetic now." He chuckled under his breath. Only because you make peace look like art, sweetheart. That evening, Harper opened the envelope. Inside was a check, not enormous, but meaningful, and a handwritten note on yellow paper. You taught me that real success isn't earned through fear. You reminded me of the kind of man I wanted to be before I became everything I swore I wouldn't. Please make something out of what's left of me. She stared at it for a long while, then folded the note and slipped it into the donation jar at the front counter. The check went to the community fund. He wanted it to build something good, she said. Let's make sure it does. Dad smiled quietly from the corner. That's how you end a war, with grace. Months passed. Pure expanded into 2 more branches across the state, each one carrying the same wooden aesthetic and message, dignity first. Harper never allowed her name on the signboards. She believed Pure belonged to everyone who walked through its doors. Felix's name faded from memory. Searches brought up old stories labeled as cautionary tales, overshadowed by features on Harper's foundation and her father's philanthropy. In one long overdue interview, Dad was asked, if you could go back and undo that moment, the one punch that changed everything, would you? He smiled faintly before answering. No, because sometimes life doesn't give you choices. It gives you turning points. That was ours. It was almost poetic how it all looped back. On the anniversary of that terrible day, 1 year after the humiliation, the rage, and the heartbreak, Harper reopened the salon's front door to a crowd of smiling faces holding signs that read, "Thank you, Harper." Inside, soft music played. The same seat Felix kicked her out of now held a little girl with tight curls and a bright grin as Harper brushed her hair gently. When the girl asked, "Miss Harper, does my hair look weird?" Harper laughed. "It looks strong, just like you." Outside, Dad stood under the awning, hands in his pockets, watching through the glass with the peace of a man who'd finally delivered every promise he'd ever made. And for the first time since everything began, the story felt complete, not because they'd won, but because no one needed to fight anymore. The pain had become purpose, the wound had become wisdom, and the family had become whole again. Part 11, Final Chapter. The night sky above the city glowed with orange and blue lights, the kind of warmth that only comes when peace finally lasts longer than pain. Pure was quiet now, its lights dimmed and doors locked after another long day of laughter, healing, and stories. I stood by the big front window, looking at the reflection of my sister sweeping the last bit of hair from the floor, her movements soft but certain. A whole year had passed since the day Felix ruined her confidence. A year since Dad stepped into that golden cage and shattered more than a jaw. He shattered every thread of fear that had held us back. And now, seeing Harper smile as if she had never cried at all, I understood something Dad once told me. Real strength never shouts, it rebuilds. Dad was outside on the curb, sitting on the hood of his SUV, watching the stars. He didn't need to say a single word. His silence had its own language, a father's victory. Harper walked out, drying her hands with a towel. "Closing time," she said gently, leaning against the car beside him. He smiled faintly. "For the salon, maybe. But for you? You're just getting started." She laughed quietly, resting her head on his shoulder. The streets were silent except for the wind carrying faint echoes of passing cars. "I used to hate the mirror," she whispered. "Now it's my favorite part of the day. Because when I look, I don't see what he called me. I see what you made me believe again." Dad turned his head slightly, his voice low. "You made yourself believe again. I just reminded you who you were." A tear slipped down her cheek, but this time it wasn't sorrow. It was gratitude so deep that words couldn't touch it. "You know," Dad said softly, "maybe that's what healing really is. When hate finally runs out of fuel and love takes the wheel." Harper smiled through her tears. "Then I hope we never run out of road." Dad chuckled, pulling her in for a side hug. "Not a chance." Later that night, I locked up Pure one last time for the day and looked back at them through the glass. Father and daughter, sitting beneath the new wooden sign. It didn't shine like gold or sparkle with fame, It glowed from the inside, with truth. The same man who walked into that salon a soldier left tonight as a father full of peace. The same girl who once covered her hair in shame now helped others uncover their confidence. And the same street that had once held humiliation now carried silence, a silence of respect. I smiled. Some stories don't end with explosions or revenge. Some just end quietly, with dignity standing where anger used to live. As I turned off the lights, Harper called out softly, "Hey, Kyle." "Yeah." She grinned. "Tomorrow's going to be busy. 2 new clients and 1 movie director who wants to film a short at Pure. Guess Felix missed his chance to be famous again." Dad laughed, shaking his head. "Let him stay forgotten, sweetheart. That's the only piece a man like that ever learns to keep." Before heading home, I pulled out my camera and snapped a picture of them under the sign, Grant and Harper, side by side, the world's quietest heroes. That photo would be the last part of this chapter, the proof that revenge didn't always need fire and fists. Sometimes, the best revenge was a calm life that looked nothing like what your enemy expected. And maybe that's where the best stories end, not with justice served, but with souls forgiven. As I walked away down the empty street, Harper's voice called after me, soft but clear. "Hey, tell me one thing," she said. "Do you think people will remember this story?" I smiled back at her. How could they forget a story that healed everyone in it? And to you listening right now, if you felt something in your heart while hearing this story, if you believe that real revenge is peace and that love always outlasts hate, then let me ask you one thing. Where are you watching from tonight? Tell me your city or country down in the comments. I love seeing where our stories travel. And before you go, tap that like and subscribe button in your own quiet way, because every click keeps these stories alive. Every voice in the comments becomes part of this journey. Tell me what kind of stories you want next. Heartbreaking betrayals, shocking revenge, family redemption, or emotional loyalty tales. I read every word, and I promise, I'll bring you the stories you feel, not just the ones you hear. Until next time, take care of yourself. Stay kind, and stay tuned for our next thrilling revenge and emotional epic. Because in this world, every pain has a story, and every story deserves its piece.